All right, let's do it.
All right.
Hi, everyone. Hello.
Hi.
How you doing? At like afternoonish, day 2 of the expo. Good energy at all? Yeah. Terrain. Well, hi. My name is actually Alicea. I'm an evangelist for games and media entertainment.
My name is Xiaoxi, and I'm a technical artist on the graphics R&D team from Unity. So today we are gonna present to you of the latest terrain tools in Unity and the road ahead. But before we jumping into the new features, let's step back a little bit to go to 2018 to see what have been leading us to today. So early 2018, we conducted a survey to our users, asking them what was on your graphics wishing list. And we got nearly 900 replies. So from the results, while there are many requests for real-time lighting, volumetrics, like a better debugging, profiling, and better platform supports, terrain was clearly, as you can see, identified as the major pain point. So then we asked users, what do you think, what does terrain need the most? As you can see, definitely feature enhancement and new features is the highest requested, as well as a better performance in the terrain engine, which was really not a surprise to us because the terrain tools in editor at the time was fairly old. So our users were mostly relying on third-party solutions for making terrains. So as 2018 continued, we started assembling a team in Seattle, Washington, with a group of graphics engineers and technical artists, which I'm part of, to focus on improving terrains in the editor. So the Pacific Northwest was a really great sceneries. As you can see, this pretty picture of Mount Rainier in the summertime. So we enjoyed a lot of those, but we also started working on some fundamental changes to the terrain engine in the editor. So next, Ashley is going to talk a little bit more about that.
So before I jump into kind of what's been covered in the new terrain updates, who here is a Unity developer? Raise your hand. Okay, some of you. All right. Has anyone here worked with the Unity terrain tools before 2018? Okay, a couple of you. Y'all are going to love these updates. Who here hasn't used it since before 2018? Like in the past year or so? Okay. So we did a bunch of updates to the terrain system recently, starting in 2018.3. And really, the main thing that we wanted to focus on was improving terrain performance and putting the power of terrain tool creation in the hands of our users. Now, to do this, we built a new GPU instance renderer. So previously, the CPU was doing a lot of the work for the terrain system, but by moving it to the GPU, we were able to dramatically reduce performance, and we had a bunch of nice side effects as well, including 100 times fewer draw calls, cluster culling, twice the amount of CPU performance, and 30 times reduced GC allocations. Now, this new render path can actually be enabled through the draw instance button, like shown in your terrain settings. And we also have new implementations like the new per pixel normal maps. So in the past, terrain normals were previously stored per vertex and interpolated values in between. Now we calculate normals per pixel as you sculpt, resulting in a much higher resolution representation of surface details. So you can see it here like in the image. So on the left, it's the before, and with the new per pixel normal maps you see on the right, it looks a lot crisper and sharper, right? So we also added 16-bit support to single channel textures versus the existing 8-bit. And this greatly helped resolve the quantization problem on terrain, height maps, and brush textures. And another big update in 2018.3 is the ability to script your own terrain tools using our terrain tool API. Now, that uses an HLSL backend for brush compositing. And we also made a lot of useful functionalities accessible via the terrain paint utility class from your custom scripts. To learn more about how you can use the Terrain Tool API and start crafting your own terrain tools, there's actually an excellent talk in the GDC Vault by one of our tech artists at Unity, Chad Foxglove. And so I definitely recommend that you check that out. But wait, there's more. So on the workflow side, we've added a new tool called Create Neighbor Terrains that offers multi-terrain support so that when you're working with your terrain tile, you can easily and seamlessly add new tiles next to your existing ones and build out your terrain that way. This allows you to also simultaneously paint and sculpt your terrains all together at once, which was previously only achievable through scripts. Now we also have a new asset types for terrain layers and terrain brushes. So now you can save your settings for brushes, for terrain layers that you're using, and you could use them across your project or in different projects. You have that now saved as an asset file that you can reference in your project. And finally, we also have terrain shaders for both the high definition and lightweight render pipelines. And in HDRP, we're supporting 2 material blending modes, height-based or density blending. Now in 2019.1, after these fundamental improvements we did in 2018.3, the team of tech artists at Unity really started to get to work making tools that they knew would be useful to our users. So in April of this past year, we released their hard work in an asset package called the Terrain Tools package. Now this Terrain Tools comes with improvements to the brush user experience. It comes with many useful advanced sculpting brushes that run on the GPU, and also a terrain toolbox that can help you build terrains beautifully and much more quickly. So how do you download the terrain tools? You can get the terrain tools via the package manager. If you're not familiar with the package manager, it's where you can get different tools that we're working on internally at Unity and download them straight into your Unity project. So if you want to work with the terrain tools, you can go to Window, Package Manager, enable preview packages, because terrain tools packages in preview, and you can get straight to work with using them. You can also, through the package manager, download the asset samples for the terrain system through the asset store. And this gives you a bunch of additional brushes and tools to work with. Now, this is for if you're on Unity 2019.1 or newer. And what it includes are, 1, common brush controls. So I don't know if in the past you've been working on your terrain and you have one brush selected and you have the size set really large, but you want to go use another brush. So you go back and then you have to change the size again. Now you can actually have settings per each brush. So you can jump in between the different brushes and kind of really quicken up your workflow as you're working. And you could do also custom adjustments to the strength, the size, the rotation, and spacing of your brushes as well. We also have a new shortcut manager. So not only can you set up your hotkeys to use Unity in general with, but now you can actually set up your shortcuts to be terrain tool specific as you're working. So you can use, for example, the ASD keys to adjust some of those brush controls. And again, a lot of this is about speeding up the time that you're spending making your terrain. If I click on this video here, you're actually gonna see a preview of it. If it plays, why don't you play? Play it the old-fashioned way. So this, by using the hotkeys, you can just make those adjustments. You don't have to be clicking back into the menu and more. Now, we also included several advanced sculpting brushes. So there are 18 sculpting brushes available in this package versus only 3 in 2018.3. And this is an overview of all the brushes that are available. We won't dive into every single one, but I'll do a quick live demo after I review these tools so you can see what they look like. Here's a preview of some of them, some of the examples. Mesh stamp tool, being able to take any mesh in your project and then stamping it in its shape into the terrain. Being able to the smooth height of your stamped objects or any kind of other part of your terrain. Using the clone brush. So let's say there's a part of your terrain that you really like. Instead of having to spend that time meticulously trying to mimic it, you can just use the clone stamp tool, clone that, place it somewhere else in your terrain. We also have the smudge, pinch, and twist brushes. And really we're adding a lot of different ways that you can really kind of get creative and experimental with your terrains. We also have the noise brush, which is one of my personal favorites. It allows you to modify terrain height using different types of noise and fractal types. You can export custom noise textures to use with this, and you can create and use noise presets as well. Using this preview in the editor, you can actually get really specific with how dense you want your noise to be. You can pan it and have it kind of be like that perfect texture you want, and then you could start applying that over your terrain. As seen here, but it looks like I'll have to jump back. You know what, I'll just show it to you in my live demo instead. Now what we have is the erosion brushes. So the erosion brushes are a big addition to the Terrains Tools package. They include hydraulic erosion, thermal erosion, and wind erosion brushes for creating the corresponding erosion effects onto your terrains. Now, so hydraulic erosion simulates the effects of water flowing across the terrain surface and kind of simulating the transport of sediment along where the water flows. Now, thermal erosion simulates the effect of sediment settling on terrain at different angles, kind of like with this like pile of like pebbles here. Now, wind erosion simulates the effect of the wind transporting and redistributing onto the terrain. These are worth showing, so I'm going to close this. This is using hydraulic erosion. Then we have thermal. And then lastly, wind. I like the wind one because in addition to all the settings, you can also change the direction that the wind is flowing using the hotkeys. It's a lot of fun to do. And also, we've added the terrain toolbox, something I'm extremely excited about. Cece's team worked hard on this, and it's really cool. But it's a brand new terrain wizard that allows you to quickly start creating terrains in your Unity scenes. So it allows you to batch create terrain tiles. It allows you to change their settings as a batch and more. It includes utilities for importing and exporting like splat maps, and you can have multi-tile terrain where you can import those splat maps and height maps and more onto. There's also a terrain settings tool that allows you to, or rather terrain utilities tool that allows you to do things that you couldn't do super easily before. For example, splitting your terrain tiles, being able to like take one big terrain tile and make it into smaller chunks, being able to cleanly remove them from your project and more. Yeah. And so instead of telling you how cool it is, I want to jump into the editor and actually show you all. So here I have a blank Unity scene, and I have my terrain toolbox open here on the right. Now, what I want to do is I want to make a terrain where I want to import a height map, and I want it to be 4 tiles in size. So I'm going to adjust the terrain width and length to 1,000 units. And I'm going to select import height map. And actually, I want to also make my tiles 2 tiles on the x-axis and 2 tiles on the z. I'll select import height map. Select the file that I want to use. I have a raw file of Mount St. Helens. And once I'm set, I'll just click create. And just like that, you have your terrain instantly in your scene ready to work with. Now, this tool can be used to really quickly add more terrain, add different, if you want to add your layers to your terrain, your materials that you're working with, you can easily add those through the terrain toolbox as well. But I want to go ahead and jump down into the actual terrains that we'll be working with and show you some of those cool brushes. So I'll rotate this way so we can see this better. There we go. Now, with one of my terrains selected, I'm going to go ahead and go to my paintbrush icon here for my paint terrain tool. And I have the raise or lower terrain option, kind of the basic option for sculpting your terrains. Now, but what's new for this is I can select one of my brush textures here, and I can go down and apply my specific settings to my raise or lower terrain brush. So I can adjust the brush strength, I can mess with the size, or I can use my hotkeys to do this, A, S, and D. So let's see, there we go, make that bigger, rotate it, and now I could start painting onto my terrain and sculpting. And you can see it seamlessly works across the tiles. I don't have to worry about setting anything up to have that happen. And now you can see how quickly you can start working across multiple terrains. Now we also have other brushes, like the Stamp Terrain tool, where you can take any texture that you have for your brush, or you can import your own textures. I'll pick this one right here. And I'll go down, and for different brushes, they have below the brush settings, specific settings to that individual brush. So here we have the stamp height. If we wanted to stamp kind of above the terrain or stamp, subtract from the terrain. So I can raise this up a bit. If I hover over, if I scroll down, let's see, I'll make this a lot higher. And I'll make the size bigger. And there we go. Now I adjust the height, and it'll place it where the terrain doesn't meet that height already. And I could stamp either any texture I have, or I could use the mesh brush tool to stamp meshes instead. There's also the sculpting brushes, and within there you can find that noise brush that I mentioned. If I scroll down here below, I have my noise height tool settings. Now I can open the settings here and choose a different kind of noise I want to work with, because I could use Perlin, but I could also use a ridge noise texture, or value-based, or Voronoi, or more. But I'll select, keep it at ridge. And I can scroll and pan through my noise texture to get the kind of level of detail that I want. This will be subtle. The more you zoom out, the more kind of rough it looks. So now I have that. I'll up my brush size. I'll pick a nice flat round brush. And I'll start painting. And you see that even though I have that flat brush, just that plain circle brush, it's applying that noise texture over it. So if I have, I'll adjust the spacing a bit. And I'm applying that noise texture. Now I could select another noise. And apply it the same way, and just have, and really add those subtle variations that can help really create like a good looking randomness in your terrain. Now, what else? What's another cool one?
You could show the transform brush.
Yes, I like these. I like the twist one because it's really exaggerated. So you can, like I was showing the preview, the brush to be able to do things like twisting your terrain. So let me up the size, and obviously I'm doing it really exaggeratedly so we could really see the difference. But you could spin your, swirl your terrain that way. You can also do, you can pinch your terrain and more. I also like actually the contrast tool, because one thing I find is that when I'm adding all this kind of like noise and texture to my terrain, sometimes I'll use like one of the erosion tools, and then I will like maybe over erode it. So let's see what hydraulic erosion. So I've eroded the terrain a lot. I want to get some of that detail back. I can go back to my contrast brush and kind of reapply that detail, and I could apply it maybe a little more subtly or really exaggeratedly. But really, again, a lot of this is about all the flexibility that you have working with these brand new brushes. Now, Cece has some more cool additional things to share with you all.
Cool. So 19.1, as you've seen a lot, so we added a bunch of cool sculpting brushes. We also added a bunch of like utility tools to import and export terrain height maps and the material distribution maps, so that users can do like round tripping between Unity Editor and whatever their favorite sculpting and terrain tools outside of Unity Editor. For example, like if you use Word Machine or Houdini to sculpt your height and do your material distribution. So what has been really missing from the 19.1 release is we did not provide a really nice and powerful material painting experience inside the editor. So that is what we've been focusing on for this past few months and prepare it for the 19.2 updates. So here is an overview of what is new in the 19.2 package updates. So first, we added a terrain visualization tool in the terrain toolbox. And the next, we introduced a new type called brush mask filter, which I'm going to talk a little bit more just in a moment. And lastly, we did a bunch of improvements to help deliver a really nice material painting experience. So next, let's take a look at the visualization tools. So here is a small video. So visualization tool can be toggled on and off from the terrain toolbox now. And it's kind of like a heat map that you can easily visualize the elevations and the height data on the terrain. So there's also a bunch of custom settings. You can custom the levels of the color and custom the colors as well. So this is really a small tool, but I think this is really a good beginning of us starting thinking about how to help our users debugging terrain features easier. So this is a really like the beginning of that, and we have a lot more to do on this. So, and next, what is the brush mask filter? So, as you already seen, starting from 18.3, you'll be able to create custom brush assets in Unity. So it comes with a single channel grayscale texture, works as your brush mask that defines on the shape and the strength of your mask. And in addition, here's some more parameters you can toggle here or change, like remap, fall off, radius on your mask. So a brush mask filter adds some additional operations to work with your brush mask. So these will be applied to almost any sculpting or painting brush now in 2019.2. And the next slide. So here is all the available mask filters in this update. So there are two types. The first type is simple mask operations, as probably many of you are already familiar with. For example, like absolute, add, clamp, complement, minimum, maximum values, negate, noise, power, or remap. And the other type, I would like to call them terrain-based, because these has series of operations that help you to isolate certain terrain features. For example, height filter will help you isolate the height range. So by providing a minimum and a maximum height values. And the concavity helps you to isolate the crevices on terrain. It also has an inverse effect, so you can isolate the outward from the crevices as well, which is pretty nice. And in addition, there is a slope aspect as well. So these filters can be easily added and removed in this, if I have the mouse view, in this mask filter stacks. So they work from the top to bottom. So the first operation will run first and then go through each mask filter to finish compiling this brush operation onto the terrain. So these filters really gives you additional flexibilities to terrain sculpting and material painting. And it works extremely well with material painting. I'm going to show you in a moment. So some other things we did to improve the painting experience before we jump into some cool examples is, so we override the built-in paint texture tool and did a bunch of UX improvements. So there's also small, simple things like we added hotkeys here. So in scene view, if you click or hold down Shift and A, it will, apparently we can skip this to go to. So if we hold down Shift and A, and you can switch into a color picker mode, you can just pick the layer from the scene view so that you don't have to jump between the inspector and the scene view to do material painting. Just some small things that really handy and like improve your life while you're working on terrain. So if we go back to the slides, So on the right side, you can see the layer editing UI. We redid this UI. So now you have all the quick actions accessible here. And all the layers now can be reordered and easily batch edited, like you add them and remove multiple of them at the same time. And also, you can save your list of layers into a palette asset that you can share with other things or your coworkers. So which is very convenient. So next. So here is an example using the paint texture tool plus the noise filters and a couple others. So thanks for helping.
No problem. Sorry for tech difficulties.
So here, remember what Ashley showed you of the noise you use to sculpting on terrain? So in this 19.2 version, noise gets its own noise editor. So you can open this noise custom editor and custom your noise with the same many parameters you can play with. So here, the artist is trying to create a kind of like stratification patterns to apply onto the terrain. So the artist was tweaking a bunch of parameters and apply it on the terrain. So now you see the stripes. So the other neat thing here is the brush preview will be updated as well. So the brush preview will represent where the targeted area is, which turned into the orangish mask versus the previous blue. So here, the artist added a complement filter. So complement is like a subtract from the value you provided. So if you provide with 1, it works like an inverse. So with the complement plus the noise filter, now artists use other material layers like the dirt and the grass to paint the areas outside of the stratification, which is the lighter brown. Okay, so next. So here is an example using more like terrain-based filters. So here the artist started painting the terrain with a base sand texture, and the artist adds a slope filter to identify the mountain slopes to give it like a dark rocky sand texture. And the next, the artist added a height, which identifies the height range. So the artist wants to paint some snow on top of the mountains. So here is this really nice snow coming out of the height range. And now the artist tweaks the lower, like the minimum value of the filter, so the snow can grab the lower mountain tops. So the next step the artist did is add a complement, which is one of my favorite filters. So the complement works with the slope. So it will now grab the lower flat areas, so the artist would like to place some grassy textures on top of it. So as you can see, very quickly, you're able to achieve really believing looking material painting results on the terrains, which is really powerful. With the options, you can easily combine them and play around with them to get some really being creative, basically. Okay. So here's an overview. So the good news is all these new features is coming out really soon. Actually, yesterday, the Unity 2019.2 editor already released. So in the next couple of weeks, we are hoping to release these updates in the package manager. So be sure to look out for updates in the package manager. If you are on 19.2 and a newer version, you'll be able to use all the cool mask filters and the material painting tools. And we definitely would love to hear feedbacks from you guys too. Okay, so next. So what's happening in 19.3? So 19.3, the long-awaited feature of be able to painting terrain holes is finally coming. So on a note to this, so terrain holes will be part of the built-in editor. So it will be shipped with 19.3 Unity editor, not from the terrain tools package. So if you just use the editor, you don't have to download the terrain tools package to be able to use this tool. So here is a sneak peek of the paint terrain holes. So So you see the artist select the paint hose brush from the brush list and started removing polygons from the terrain. So just as simple as that. So then if you switch to wireframe mode, you can see, so painting terrain hose is actually working kind of like terrain surface mask. So basically it masks the area you don't want the terrain to be there, like with the polygons. So if you use the erase terrain hose, you will be able to bring back the previous terrain height data. So in my opinion, it's really like a surface mask. Okay. So some other features I would like to mention for terrain hose is, so actually, if you are on Unity Alpha program, if you are on 19.3, Alpha 6 and newer, you will be able to use this paint terrain hose from editor. And the other features I would like to mention here is trees and details. If you have trees and details placed on the terrain, when you place the hose, it will remove the trees and details automatically. And the same for collision and the navigation mesh. So it will make sure things fall through the hose and your nav mesh will update correctly as well. So if you bake light maps, so light mapping data and the calculation will be updated as well. So all in one. Okay, hope you are excited. Okay, I guess that's all the information we would like to share today. And if you want to learn more about Unity Terrain and world building, please go to learn.unity.com. There's a bunch of free resources. And tomorrow we are having a terrain workshop here at the same place. If you want to have some hands-on experience using the latest terrain tools, please come back.
Yep, and then if you attend the workshop, you'll actually be able to try some of those 2019.2 tools that we showed as well. So thank you all so much for joining us today. Does anyone have any questions?
Yes.
Custom shaders?
Custom shaders? Are you talking about the sculpting or material painting? Material. So the material, you can still use custom shader and materials. But the good thing is the mask filter and the new features doesn't rely on the specific shader we made. So it works for all. So if you do your own custom shaders, so you'll be able to use them as well. Yeah.
Other questions? There you go. That was easy.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yes. So are you talking about the final results or the material distributions? I believe there's other custom tools for doing that, from render out images from the engine. So, but for us, if that's what you are looking for. So for us, if you need to edit the material distribution elsewhere, you will be able to, like Ashley mentioned, we have tools to export the distribution map and re-import it. Yeah. Okay. That's a good question. So the 3D geometry right now, if you have you used Unity's poly brush or
Builder.
Pro Builder, like something like that. So those can be those tools come with good snapping features, and but a little bit more I want to talk about is for the future of the terrain tools we plan at the moment. It's definitely related to placing objects, not only for decorations or vegetations, for example, but also like static objects you would like to place on terrain. We definitely will support nice tools for you to easily snap onto the terrain height, and position it, and maybe blending nicely with the base terrain,
We have time for like maybe one or two more. All right, then thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you very much.